The transport vessel Serenity's Grace descended through the amber-hazed atmosphere of Xylos Prime like a falling star trying to change its mind about gravity. I watched from the observation deck of the diplomatic hub, my forehead pressed against the cool transparency of the viewport, feeling the subtle vibration of the ship's approach through the deck plates beneath my boots. The year was 2247, by Earth's reckoning. Though on Xylos Prime, they counted cycles since the Great Accord, and nobody really cared what year it was on a planet that humans had barely set foot on 2 decades ago. Funny how time works when you're light years from home. It stretches and compresses like taffy, and before you know it, you've been away so long that the memory of rain on your face starts to feel like something you imagined. I'd been assigned to the Xylos Prime diplomatic mission for 18 months. 18 months of watching the galaxy's most powerful species pretend they weren't terrified of each other. 18 months of drinking synthetic coffee that tasted like regret and watching the suns set over a city built from crystal and light. But today was different. Today, Ambassador Thalvok of the Vrethian Concordance was arriving for the interstellar trade accords, and with her came the most unusual diplomatic delegation in recorded galactic history. A human bodyguard, my colleague Jax had said that morning, his translator module flickering with amusement. Can you imagine? A Vrethian ambassador, one of the most sophisticated minds in the galaxy, escorted by a creature from a Category 12 Deathworld. Jax was a Krillian, all sharp angles and bioluminescent patterns that rippled across his skin when he was excited. Right now, he was practically glowing. "I've read the files," I replied, not taking my eyes from the viewport. "She's been with Ambassador Thalvok for 3 years, personal recommendation from the Vrethian Security Council itself." "The Vrethian Security Council," Jax repeated, his voice carrying that particular Krillian inflection that meant he was about to say something sarcastic. "The same council that refused to even acknowledge human existence until we proved we could survive their microbiological testing. The same council that classified Earth as unsuitable for diplomatic engagement for 7 standard cycles. They changed their minds. They changed their minds because we had something they wanted. We always have something they want. That's how this works, isn't it?" Jax's bioluminescence flickered to a cool blue. "The question is whether this particular human knows what she's gotten herself into." I turned from the viewport. "You think she doesn't?" "I think," Jax said slowly, "that the Vrethians have a tendency to underestimate. They see the physical limitations, the primitive technology base, the short lifespans. They don't see what makes humans dangerous." "And what makes humans dangerous?" Jax's skin rippled with a pattern I'd learned to recognize as discomfort. "The same thing that makes you all survive on a planet where everything is trying to kill you, adaptability, and something else, something I can't quite quantify." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You sound like you're describing a monster." "I'm describing a survivor. There's a difference," Jax's translator module hummed, though sometimes the line gets blurry. The transport vessel had completed its descent. I could see it now, a sleek silver craft that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, settling onto the landing platform with barely a whisper of its engines. Vrethian engineering was something to behold, elegant, efficient, and utterly terrifying in its precision. "Come on," I said, pushing away from the viewport. "We should be at the reception." "The reception," Jax echoed, falling into step beside me. "Where all the most powerful species in the galaxy will gather to pretend they're not trying to poison each other's trade agreements. Where the Vrethian ambassador will be surrounded by enemies disguised as allies. And where a single human will stand between her and the most elaborate assassination attempt in 300 cycles." I stopped walking. "What?" Jax's bioluminescence flickered in a pattern I'd never seen before, something between amusement and warning. "You didn't think they were actually here for trade, did you?" Ambassador Thalvok is the most vocal opponent of the Zorn Corporation's expansion into the Outer Reach. The Zorn Corporation controls approximately 43% of all interstellar transport, and their CEO, Lord Darvix, happens to be attending this very summit. You're saying someone's going to try to kill her? I'm saying, Jax replied, his voice dropping to a whisper, that if I were Lord Darvix, I wouldn't want anyone as vocal as Ambassador Thalvok leaving this planet alive. The doors to the reception hall slid open before us, and the sound of hundreds of conversations washed over me like a wave. The hall was a masterpiece of Xylo's architecture, towering columns of crystalline growth that pulsed with soft light, a ceiling that showed the churning amber sky of the planet outside, and floor that seemed to ripple like water beneath our feet. And everywhere, the representatives of a dozen species, each one more alien than the last. The Krillians in their shimmering suits, the Xylos themselves tall and ethereal, their bodies shifting like sand in the wind. The Zorn delegation, all sharp edges and predatory grace, their compound eyes scanning the room with cold calculation. And scattered among them, a handful of humans, diplomats, aides, and support staff, looking hopelessly out of place in their functional suits and uncomfortable shoes. Lady Alara, Jax whispered, his bioluminescence flaring with recognition. The Vrethian ambassador's personal aide. She's the one who requested the human bodyguard. I followed his gaze to a figure standing near the main entrance, a Vrethian female, tall and elegant, with skin the color of twilight and eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies within them. She moved through the crowd like water flowing around stones, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. Beside her stood the human. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'5", with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and features that were unremarkable in the way that made her easy to overlook. She wore a simple black suit, the kind that human security personnel favored, and her posture was relaxed in a way that felt almost careless. But I'd been a diplomat for 8 years. I'd learned to read people. And the way this woman stood, weight evenly distributed, hands loose at her sides, eyes constantly moving, told me she was anything but careless. Captain Sarah Chen, Jax read from his data pad. Former Special Forces Earth Defense Force, decorated veteran, 2 tour in the Martian conflict, specialist in close quarters protection, personal recommendation from General Marcus Webb himself. The Martian conflict, I repeated, that was brutal. That was a war, Jax corrected. The Martian conflict was what happened when humans decided they couldn't share a planet with themselves anymore. And Captain Chen was right in the middle of it. She doesn't look like a soldier. Jax's bioluminescence flickered with something that might have been amusement. They never do, that's the point. The Vrethian ambassador entered the hall with the kind of presence that made people stop talking. She was tall for her species, nearly 7 feet, with skin that shimmered between shades of blue and purple and eyes that seemed to pierce right through you. Her ceremonial robes flowed behind her like a living shadow, and the delicate antennae on her forehead twitched with the awareness of a dozen gazes upon her. But it wasn't the ambassador who caught my attention. It was her human bodyguard. Because while everyone else in the room was watching the ambassador, the human woman was watching everyone else. I saw her eyes move systematically across the crowd, cataloging faces, positions, potential threats. She noted the Zorn delegation with barely a flicker of recognition. They were on her mental map now, marked and tagged and observed. She registered the Krillian delegation, the Xylos host officials, the handful of other humans scattered throughout the room. And then she saw me. Her eyes met mine for just a fraction of a second, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The uncomfortable sensation of being assessed. She read me in an instant: height, weight, approximate age, potential threat level. I could almost see the calculations running behind her eyes. the cold professional assessment of a predator sizing up its environment. Then she blinked, and it was gone. She was just a woman in a suit again, standing quietly behind her charge. But I knew what I'd seen. "Jax," I murmured, keeping my voice low. "That bodyguard, she's not just a soldier." Jax's translator module hummed. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said slowly, "that she's something else, something I can't quite put my finger on." Jax's bioluminescence flickered with concern. Should I be worried? I thought about it, about the way she'd scanned the room, about the way she'd assessed me without breaking stride, about the way she stood so perfectly balanced, so utterly at ease in a room full of beings that could kill her without breaking a sweat. "No," I said finally, "I don't think we should be worried." But I wasn't entirely sure I believed that. Ambassador Thalvok worked the room with the practiced ease of someone who'd been playing these games for 300 standard cycles. She moved from delegation to delegation, her translator module humming with the complex linguistic patterns of a dozen species, her antennae twitching with the subtle cues that only Vrethians could fully interpret. And through it all, Captain Sarah Chin was there. Not standing beside her, that would have been too obvious. Instead, she drifted through the crowd like a ghost, always within sight of her charge but never quite close enough to draw attention. She'd pause at the refreshment table, pick up a glass of something blue and bubbling, and take a sip while her eyes tracked the room. She'd exchange pleasantries with a Xylos official, nodding along to some story about trade routes while her gaze drifted to the Zorn delegation. She was everywhere and nowhere, visible and invisible all at once. I watched her for nearly an hour before she approached me. "Lieutenant Aris," her voice was soft, with just the faintest hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. "You're the human liaison for the diplomatic corps." I nodded, surprised she knew my name. "That's right." "And you must be Captain Chen." "Sarah," she corrected, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just Sarah. The captain thing is for official functions." "Sarah, then," I gestured to the room around us. "How are you finding the reception?" Her smile widened just a fraction. "It's interesting. I've never been in a room with so many species before. The Xylos are fascinating. Their translators barely function in low light. Did you know that? Makes sense given their homeworld's constant daylight. And the Krillians," she paused, tilting her head. "They're nervous about something. Look at their bioluminescence. The patterns are all wrong for a diplomatic function." I blinked. "You can read Krillian bioluminescence." "Learned it last week," she shrugged. "I had a long flight. Figured it would be useful to know what everyone was thinking." I found myself reassessing everything I thought I knew about this woman. "That's impressive." "It's practical," she corrected. "In my line of work, practical is more important than impressive." "And what exactly is your line of work?" Her eyes met mine again, and I saw something flicker in their depths, a darkness that had nothing to do with the lighting of the room. "I keep people alive," she said simply. "That's all. I keep people alive." Before I could respond, a commotion near the main entrance drew our attention. The Zorn delegation had arrived. Lord Darvix entered the reception hall with the theatrical grandeur of someone who'd never had to wait for anything in his life. He was enormous, easily 9 feet tall, with the kind of physical presence that made the air feel heavier. His compound eyes glowed with an inner fire, and his voice, when he spoke, carried the rasping quality of a creature that had adapted to survive in the most hostile environments the galaxy had to offer. "Ambassador Thalvok," he boomed, his translator module distorting his words into something barely comprehensible. "What a pleasure to finally meet you in person. I've heard so much about your passionate advocacy for the outer reach." The ambassador's antennae twitched with suppressed hostility. "Lord Darvix, I was beginning to think you wouldn't grace us with your presence. Wouldn't miss it for the world." Darvix's compound eyes swept the room, and I saw them pause on Sarah for just a fraction of a second too long. I see you've brought unusual company, a human. How delightfully primitive." Sarah didn't react. She didn't flinch, didn't bristle, didn't do anything that might indicate she'd heard the insult. She simply stood there, hands loose at her sides, watching Lord Darvix with the same patient attention she'd given everyone else in the room. But I noticed something. Her weight had shifted, just slightly, just enough that she was now positioned between the ambassador and the Zorn delegation. "A human bodyguard," Lord Darvix continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "How quaint. I've heard they're quite resilient for creatures that evolved on a Deathworld." "Humans are remarkable," Ambassador Thalvok replied, her voice carefully neutral. "They've adapted to survive conditions that would kill most species in the galaxy. Their homeworld's gravity, its atmospheric composition, its indigenous life forms, all of these would be fatal to a Zorn, if I'm not mistaken." Lord Darvix's compound eyes flared with anger. "Our homeworld is perfectly—" "I'm sure it is," the ambassador interrupted smoothly. "Just as Earth is perfectly suitable for humans, the key word being suitable for different planets, different creatures, different needs. You understand?" The tension in the room was palpable. I saw the Xylos officials edging away, the Krillians' bioluminescence flaring with alarm, the handful of other species representatives suddenly finding their drinks very interesting. And through it all, Sarah Chen stood in perfect stillness, watching everything with eyes that missed nothing. "You know what I find amusing?" Lord Darvix's voice had dropped to a whisper, the kind that carried more threat than any shout. "The way primitive species always think they can play with the big boys. They come to the galaxy, they see all the technology, all the power, all the wealth, and they think, 'Oh, I can have that. I can be that.' And then they find out the hard way that there's a reason some species rise and others fall." "Is that a threat?" Ambassador Thalvok asked, her voice still calm. "That's an observation." Lord Darvix's compound eyes shifted to Sarah. "Tell me, little human, how long do you think you'd survive in a real fight, against someone who actually knows what they're doing?" Sarah's expression didn't change. "I've been in real fights, Lord Darvix. I've survived all of them. That's why I'm standing here." "You think your combat training means anything?" Darvix laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made several nearby Xylos flinch. "You fought other humans, other primitives. You've never faced anything like a Zorn warrior." "You're right," Sarah agreed, and her voice was so calm, so utterly without emotion, that it was more unnerving than any threat could have been. "I've never faced a Zorn warrior, but I've faced humans who thought they were gods. I've faced creatures that evolved in complete darkness, that couldn't be seen or heard until they were already on top of you. I've faced enemies with technology that should have been impossible, with weapons that should have been unstoppable. And I'm still standing. So maybe, just maybe, I know what I'm doing." The room was silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. Lord Darvix stared at Sarah for a long moment. Then he laughed again, softer this time. "You have courage, little human. I'll give you that. But courage is just another word for being too stupid to know when you're outmatched. Courage is being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway," Sarah corrected. "But you're right, courage alone wouldn't save me. That's why I brought backup." She smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her, and it was terrifying. It was the smile of someone who knew something you didn't, who'd already calculated every possible outcome and found them all acceptable. "I brought backup, Lord Darvix," she repeated, "and my backup is better than yours." Lord Darvix's compound eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" But Sarah had already turned away, her attention shifting to a group of Xylos officials who'd been hovering at the edge of the confrontation. She moved toward them with the same casual grace she'd shown all evening, leaving Lord Darvix standing alone in the center of the room with a look of furious confusion on his face. I watched her go, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I'd just witnessed something important. Something that would have consequences, none of us could fully predict. Because I'd seen the way she'd smiled. And I'd seen the way Lord Darvix had reacted to it. Whatever Sarah Chen was planning, whatever she'd brought with her to Xylo's Prime, it was going to change everything. Jax found me there. "You look terrible," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "And before you say anything, I know I look fantastic. It's a Krillian thing." I managed a weak smile. "Did you see what happened tonight, between Lord Darvix and the ambassador's bodyguard?" Jax's bioluminescence flickered with concern. "I saw, everyone saw. The Zorn delegation left immediately after the confrontation. Lord Darvix was agitated. I could hear him from 3 rooms away." "That's not good. He's the most powerful being in this sector." "He's the most powerful being in this sector," Jax agreed. "And now he's publicly embarrassed and looking for someone to blame. I'd say the Vrethian ambassador has made a very powerful enemy." "She had him anyway," I pointed out. "That's the whole reason she's here, to oppose his corporation's expansion." "Yes, but there's a difference between opposing someone and humiliating them in front of half the galaxy. Lord Darvix won't forget this, and he won't forgive it either." I took a sip of my coffee, grimaced, and set it aside. "What do you know about Sarah Chen, the bodyguard?" Jax's bioluminescence flickered in the pattern that meant he was accessing information. Not much more than what was in the files. "Born on Earth, somewhere in the Eastern Hemisphere. Enlisted in the Earth Defense Force at 18. Specialized in close quarters protection. Decorated for actions during the Martian conflict. After the war, she was recruited by the Vrethian Security Council for a special assignment." "What kind of special assignment?" "The file doesn't say. Just that she's been with Ambassador Thalvok for 3 years and has an exemplary record." Jax paused. "But I did some digging, unofficial channels." I leaned forward and I found something interesting. Jax's bioluminescence dimmed, a sign that he was about to share something sensitive. During the Martian conflict, Captain Chen was part of a unit called the Ghosts. They were an off-the-books organization, special operations, the kind of unit that technically doesn't exist. Their job was to go places the regular military couldn't go and do things that couldn't be acknowledged. "What kind of things?" "The kind of things that win wars. The kind of things that make people like Lord Darvix very, very nervous." Jax's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "There are rumors, Aris, stories, about what the Ghosts did on Mars, about what they're capable of. And every story I've heard says the same thing. Captain Chen was their best." I sat back in my chair, processing this. "So she's not just a soldier, she's something more." "She's something more," Jax agreed. "And I think Lord Darvix is about to find out exactly what that means." We sat in silence for a long moment. "Have you heard about the Deathworld thing?" I asked finally. "The way Lord Darvix kept calling Earth a Deathworld." Jax's bioluminescence flickered with amusement. "Oh, I've heard. It's a common insult. Most species consider Earth to be a Category 12 Deathworld, the highest classification for planetary danger. The gravity is too high, the atmosphere is too corrosive, the microbial life is too aggressive, the native fauna is too hostile. By every metric, Earth should be uninhabitable. And yet we live there." "And yet you live there," Jax agreed. "And not only do you live there, you thrive there. You're the most adaptable species in the known galaxy. You've taken a world that should have killed you and turned it into your home. That's not something most species can say." "So Lord Darvix was right. Earth is a death world." "He was right," Jax confirmed. "But he was also wrong, because he thinks that makes humans weak, that we're primitive because we evolved on a dangerous world. But the truth is, it's the opposite. A species that can survive a death world is stronger than a species that evolved in comfort. We're the ones who should be afraid." I thought about that, about all the times I'd felt out of place among the galaxy's more advanced species, about all the times I'd been dismissed as primitive, undeveloped, inferior. "Maybe they're right to be afraid," I said quietly. "Maybe we really are dangerous." Jax's bioluminescence flickered with something that might have been agreement. "Maybe you are, but dangerous isn't the same as evil, and I've got a feeling that Sarah Chen is going to prove that tonight." I was still awake, still thinking about everything Jax had told me, still trying to make sense of the woman who'd walked into the reception hall like she owned the place and reduced Lord Darvix to sputtering rage in under 5 minutes. The knock came again, softer this time. "Who is it?" I called, reaching for the weapon I kept under my pillow. "It's Sarah." Her voice was muffled through the door. "Can I come in?" I hesitated for just a moment, then crossed the room and opened the door. Sarah Chen stood in the corridor, still wearing her black suit, her dark hair slightly disheveled as if she'd been running her hands through it. There was a faint sheen of sweat on her forehead, and her eyes, those deep, dark eyes, were shadowed with something I couldn't quite identify. "Can I come in?" she repeated. "We need to talk." I stepped aside and let her enter. She moved through my quarters with the same careful attention she'd shown in the reception hall, scanning every corner, every shadow, every possible hiding place. Only when she was satisfied that we were alone did she turn to face me. "You're the human liaison for the diplomatic corps," she said. "That means you're officially the representative of the Earth government on Xylos Prime." "Is that correct?" "It's correct," I confirmed. "Why?" "Because I need you to make a formal complaint, on behalf of the Vrethian ambassador, about the treatment she received tonight from Lord Darvix." I blinked. "A formal complaint? That'll take weeks to process, and even then it won't mean anything," Sarah finished. "I know, but I need it on the record. I need it documented, because in 48 hours something is going to happen, and I want everyone to know what led up to it." I felt a chill run down my spine. What's going to happen in 48 hours? Sarah moved to the window, staring out at the amber-lit city of Xylos Prime. "Lord Darvix isn't just a businessman. He's the head of a criminal empire that spans 3 sectors. He controls the space lanes, the mineral rights, the trading networks. And he's been getting away with it for centuries because no one's been willing to stand up to him. Until now." "Until now," she agreed. "Ambassador Thalvok has been gathering evidence against him for years. Evidence of illegal mining operations, smuggling rings, assassination contracts. She's got enough to bring him down in a galactic court, provided she survives long enough to present it." "Survives? You think he's going to try to kill her?" Sarah turned to face me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my blood run cold. "He's already tried, 3 times in the last year. That's why I'm here." The Vrethian Security Council knew he'd make a move at this summit, so they brought in the best protection they could find. "And that's you." "That's me." Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "I've been tracking Lord Darvix's movements for 3 months. I know his schedule, his patterns, his weaknesses, and I know that he's planning something for the final day of the summit." "What?" "I don't know the details, but I know it's going to involve a lot of firepower and a lot of casualties." Sarah paused. "That's why I need the complaint on record. It's not about justice, it's about creating a paper trail. When Lord Darvix strikes, I want everyone to know he was the aggressor. I want there to be no doubt about who started it." "And what happens when he strikes?" Sarah's smile was thin and cold. "Then I do my job. I protect the ambassador, and I make sure that Lord Darvix regrets every decision that led him to this point." I studied her for a long moment. "You're not just a bodyguard, are you? You're something more." "I'm a soldier," she corrected. "A soldier who's been trained to do whatever it takes to complete the mission. And right now, the mission is keeping Ambassador Thalvok alive long enough to bring down Lord Darvix's criminal empire. Even if that means killing him." Sarah's eyes met mine, and I saw the darkness there. The same darkness I'd glimpsed in the reception hall. The darkness of someone who'd seen too much, done too much, survived too much. "If it comes to that," she said quietly, "I'll do what needs to be done. I always do." I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah Chen's face, heard her voice, felt the weight of her words settling over me like a shroud. She knew something was coming, something big, and she'd already made her peace with it. The summit's second day was scheduled for mid-morning, a series of trade negotiations that would test the patience of everyone involved. Ambassador Thalvok would be presenting her evidence against the Zorn Corporation, laying out the case for sanctions that could cripple Lord Darvik's empire. And Lord Darvix would be doing everything in his power to stop her. I arrived at the summit hall early, hoping to get a sense of the room before the negotiations began. The hall was enormous, a vast amphitheater carved from living crystal, with seats for hundreds of representatives arranged in concentric circles around a central dais. A few delegates were already present, reviewing notes, murmuring to each other in hushed voices. I spotted Jax near the entrance, his bioluminescence flickering with barely contained excitement. "Aris," he called, waving me over. "You're early. Good, I wanted to talk to you before the proceedings begin." "What's happening?" I asked, falling into step beside him. "Something big," Jax replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been talking to my contacts in the Vrethian delegation. They're saying that Ambassador Thalvok has evidence of multiple Zorn Corporation crimes, everything from illegal mining to murder. If she presents it today, Lord Darvix is finished. Then he's going to try to stop her." "Exactly." Jax's bioluminescence flickered with alarm. "And my contacts are saying that he's brought in additional security, heavy security, the kind of security that's not just for show." Additional security. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of security? Jax's eyes darted around the room. "I don't know the details, but I heard whispers about a Zorn battle squad, 20 warriors fully armed. They're supposedly positioned throughout the city, ready to move at a moment's notice." "A battle squad? That's an act of war." "Not if they're here as private security for Lord Darvix's personal protection," Jax pointed out. "That's the loophole. Anyone can bring security to a diplomatic summit. It's a standard protocol." "But 20 warriors, that's not security, that's an invasion force." Jax nodded grimly. "I know, and I think Sarah Chen knows it too." I found Sarah standing near the back of the hall, her eyes scanning the crowd with the same watchful attention she'd shown the night before. She was dressed in the same black suit, her hair pulled back in the same practical ponytail, but there was something different about her today. Something harder, more focused. "Sarah," I said, approaching cautiously, "can we talk?" Her eyes flicked to me, then back to the crowd. "About what?" "About what's coming, about what you're planning." She was silent for a moment. Then she nodded, just barely, and gestured for me to follow her. We moved to a quiet corner of the hall, away from the other delegates. Sarah positioned herself with her back to the wall, her eyes still scanning the room as she spoke. "What do you want to know?" "I want to know what's going to happen today. I want to know what you're going to do." Sarah's lips twitched in something that might have been a smile. "I'm going to do my job, that's all. I'm going to protect the ambassador." "And what if Lord Darvix attacks?" "Then I'll deal with it." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "That's what I'm trained to do." I studied her for a long moment. "You're not scared, are you?" "You're not scared at all." "I'm terrified," she corrected, and there was something in her voice that made me believe her. Anyone who says they aren't scared is either lying or stupid, but being scared doesn't mean you stop. It means you keep going anyway. That's what soldiers do. "The Martian conflict," I said quietly. "Was that where you learned that?" Her eyes flickered. The Martian conflict was a nightmare, but it's not where I learned to be a soldier. That happened long before. When? She was silent for a long moment. My father was a soldier, she said finally. He taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. He taught me that when I was 6 years old. What happened to him? Nothing, she said, but something in her voice told me that wasn't entirely true. Nothing happened to him. He's still alive. He's still a soldier. He's still the best man I've ever known. So you come from a military family. You could say that. Sarah's eyes drifted to the crowd again. My whole family is military. My father, my mother, my brothers. We've been soldiers for 3 generations. It's what we do. It's who we are. And you don't ever want to do something else. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. What else would I do? I've been a soldier since I was 18. I don't know how to be anything else. And even if I did, she paused. Even if I did, I don't think I'd want to. This is what I'm good at. This is where I can make a difference. By protecting people. By protecting people, she agreed. There are a lot of bad things in the galaxy. A lot of people who want to hurt others for their own gain. If I can stop even one of them, I've done something worthwhile. I thought about that. About the weight of responsibility she carried. About the burden of knowing that lives depended on her decisions. That's a heavy load, I said, carrying that much responsibility. Sarah's eyes met mine and I saw something there. A flicker of exhaustion, of weariness, of something that might have been sadness. It's not heavy when you remember why you're doing it, she said quietly. It's not heavy when you remember who you're protecting. Representatives from a dozen species rose to speak, each one presenting their case with the careful precision of practiced diplomats. The Xylos spoke about trade routes. The Krillians spoke about resource allocation. The Vrethians spoke about justice and accountability. And Lord Darvik sat in his seat, his compound eyes glowing with barely suppressed fury, watching Ambassador Thalvok as she took her place at the dais. Esteemed representatives, the ambassador began, her voice carrying through the hall with crystalline clarity. I stand before you today not as a politician, not as a diplomat, but as a voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. For the billions of beings who have been exploited, abused, and destroyed by the greed of a single corporation. She paused, letting the words sink in. The Zorn Corporation has operated with impunity for over 300 cycles. They have polluted worlds, destroyed civilizations, and murdered anyone who stood in their way. And today, I intend to prove it. Lord Darvix rose from his seat. This is outrageous. The ambassador has no evidence for these accusations. Actually, Ambassador Thalvok replied, her antennae twitching with satisfaction, I have quite a lot of evidence, and I'm prepared to present it to this assembly. The room erupted into chaos. Representatives rose to their feet, shouting over each other. The Xylos host officials attempted to restore order, their translucent bodies pulsing with alarm. The Krillians' bioluminescence flickered wildly as they tried to process the situation. And through it all, Sarah Chen stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on Lord Darvix. I saw the moment it happened. Lord Darvix reached into his robes, his hand closing around something I couldn't quite see, and Sarah moved. She crossed the distance between them in a blur of motion, her hand shooting out to grip his wrist. The Zorn leader's eyes flared with surprise and then rage. You dare, he began, but Sarah's grip tightened. I dare, she said softly, and you need to think very carefully about your next move, Lord Darvix. Because if you pull whatever you're reaching for out of those robes, I'm going to have to do something that neither of us wants. Lord Darvix's compound eyes narrowed. You think you can stop me, a primitive human against a Zorn warrior? I don't think, Sarah corrected, I know. And then she smiled again, that terrible smile that held no warmth, no humor, no humanity at all. I know because I've faced worse than you. I've faced things that would make you scream in the dark, and I'm still standing. So let me ask you one more time, are you sure you want to do this?" The room had fallen silent. Every single representative in the hall was watching the confrontation, their expressions ranging from shock to horror to barely suppressed excitement. The Xylo's host officials had frozen in place, their bodies shimmering with confusion. The Krillian's bioluminescence had gone completely dark, a sign of extreme distress. And Lord Darvik stood there, his hand frozen halfway to his robes, his compound eyes locked with Sarah's. "You're bluffing," he snarled. "You're a human, a weak primitive." "I'm from Earth," Sarah interrupted. "You know what they call Earth, a Deathworld, Category 12, the highest classification for planetary danger, and do you know what that means?" Lord Darvix didn't answer. He couldn't. "It means I grew up on a world where everything was trying to kill me. It means my ancestors survived predators that could crush a Zorn warrior like an insect. It means I've been fighting to survive since the moment I was born. And it means that you," she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to barely a whisper, "you are nothing to me." Lord Darvix's hand fell away from his robes. "Good choice," Sarah said, stepping back. "Now, why don't you sit down and let the ambassador finish her presentation? I'm sure we'd all like to hear what she has to say." I watched him sink into his chair like a deflating balloon, his compound eyes still fixed on Sarah with a mixture of rage and something that might have been fear. The other representatives slowly returned to their seats, their murmurs filling the hall like the buzz of insects. Ambassador Thalvok resumed her presentation as if nothing had happened. "I have evidence," she said, "that the Zorn Corporation has been involved in illegal mining operations on at least 7 worlds. I have evidence of smuggling, bribery, and murder, and I have witnesses who are willing to testify to all of it." The room listened in stunned silence. For the next 3 hours, the ambassador presented her case. She produced documents, holographic recordings, and testimony from witnesses who'd been brought to Xylo's Prime under heavy guard. She laid out a pattern of criminal activity that spanned centuries and involved some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. And at the end, she asked for a vote. "I move that the Zorn Corporation be declared a criminal enterprise," she announced, "and that Lord Darvix be taken into custody to face justice for his crimes." The vote was called. The representatives filed their choices through the encrypted systems of their translators, and when the results were announced, the room erupted into chaos once again. Lord Darvix rose from his seat, his compound eyes blazing with fury. "This is illegal. This is a conspiracy. You can't do this." "We can," Ambassador Thalvok replied, "and we have. The evidence is clear. The crimes are undeniable, and justice will be served." Lord Darvix's eyes darted around the room, searching for allies, for support, for anything that might save him. But there was nothing. His colleagues had abandoned him. His supporters had turned against him, and his enemies were closing in. "You'll regret this," he snarled, pointing a clawed finger at the ambassador. "All of you, you'll regret this. I have connections, I have resources, and I will not forget." He turned to leave, but Sarah was already there, blocking his path. "Going somewhere?" she asked, her voice pleasant. "You can't stop me," Lord Darvix snarled. "I'm a diplomatic representative. I have immunity." "Immunity from prosecution," Sarah corrected. "Not immunity from accountability. And right now, I'm accountable for your safety. So I'm going to escort you to your quarters, and you're going to stay there until the Xylo's authorities decide what to do with you." "You can't." "Actually, I can." Sarah's hand shot out, gripping his wrist again. "And I will. Now let's go." She led him away from the dais, past the stunned representatives, past the shimmering Xylo's officials, past the silent Krillians. And no one tried to stop her. I found Sarah later that evening, standing on a balcony overlooking the crystal city of Xylo's Prime. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, and the city below glittered like 1,000 jewels. "Quite a view," I said, approaching cautiously. "It's beautiful," she agreed. "Hard to believe there's so much ugliness in the universe when you're looking at something like this." "Is it over? Is it really over?" Sarah was silent for a long moment. "It's over for now, but it's never really over. Lord Darvix will be taken away, his empire will be dismantled, and justice will be served. But there will be others, there are always others." That's a cynical way to look at it. It's a realistic way to look at it. Sarah turned to face me, and I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, a weariness that went beyond simple exhaustion. "I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen a lot of bad people get what they deserved, and I've seen a lot of good people die in the process. It's never really over, not for them, not for the people they've hurt, and not for the people who try to stop them. So why do it? Why keep fighting?" Sarah was silent for a long moment. "Because someone has to," she said finally. "Because if the good people give up, the bad people win, and I can't let that happen, not while I'm still breathing." I thought about that. About all the soldiers I'd known, all the diplomats I'd worked with, all the people who dedicated their lives to making the galaxy a better place. "You're a good person, Sarah," I said. "You're a good person doing a hard job." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I'm not a good person, I'm a soldier. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Good people don't have to do the things I've done. Good people don't have to kill, don't have to hurt, don't have to make the choices I've made. I've done terrible things, Aris, necessary things, but terrible all the same." "The Martian conflict," I said quietly. "What happened there?" Sarah's eyes darkened. A lot of things I can't talk about, a lot of things I don't want to talk about. And a lot of things I'll never forget." "You don't have to tell me," I said. "I just want you to know, whatever happened, whatever you did, I don't think it makes you a bad person." Sarah looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded, just barely. "Thank you," she said quietly. That means more than you know." The suns had set completely by the time Sarah and I left the balcony. The city below had transformed into a sea of lights, shimmering and pulsing with the rhythm of Xylo's life. Above us, the sky was darkening to a deep violet, with stars just beginning to appear. Lord Darvix had been taken into custody. His empire was in ruins, and the galaxy was safe for now. But as I walked with Sarah through the diplomatic compound, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. Something about her, about the way she carried herself, about the weight she seemed to carry. "Sarah," I said as we reached the door to her quarters, "what happens now? For you, I mean, what's next?" She paused, her hand on the door. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been assigned to Ambassador Thalvok's protection for 3 years. That assignment has ended, so I'll move on to whatever comes next." "And what comes next?" "Another assignment, another mission, another war," she shrugged, a gesture of resignation. "That's what I do, that's who I am." "It doesn't have to be," I said. "You could choose something else." "Something different." Sarah looked at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes, a brief moment of hope quickly extinguished. "Like what?" "I don't know, but you have options. You don't have to be a soldier forever." She laughed softly. "That's what my father used to say. He told me I could be anything I wanted to be, but I never wanted to be anything else. I never could." "Maybe that's the problem," I said. "Maybe you never gave yourself the chance." Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded, just barely. "Maybe," she said, "but I don't know how to be anything else. I've been a soldier my whole life. It's the only thing I'm good at." "That's not true," I said. "You're good at protecting people. You're good at caring about others. Those aren't just soldier skills. Those are human skills." Sarah's eyes met mine. "You really believe that? You really think I could be something else?" "I really do," I said. You're more than just a soldier, Sarah. You're more than just the things you've done. You're a good person trying to do the right thing in a galaxy that makes it almost impossible, and that means something." She stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly, a smile spread across her face, a real smile, not the cold, terrifying one she'd shown Lord Darvik's, a warm, human smile. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you know." Chapter 10: The Departure. The next morning, I woke to find that Sarah had already left. Her quarters were empty, her belongings gone, her presence fading like a dream upon waking. The only sign that she'd ever been there was a small, handwritten note on the desk. "Aris," it read, "I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye in person, but I've never been good at goodbyes. They always feel too final, too permanent, and I'd like to think this isn't permanent. I'm leaving Xylos Prime today. Ambassador Thalvok has arranged for me to take some time off, something I've never really done before. I'm going to take your advice. I'm going to try to be something else, something more than a soldier. I don't know if I'll succeed. I don't know if I can be anything else, but I'm going to try, and I wanted to thank you for helping me believe that I could. Stay safe, Aris, and remember, when the galaxy seems dark, look for the stars. They're always there. They're just sometimes hard to see. Your friend, Sarah." I read the note 3 times, then folded it carefully and tucked it into my pocket. Then I went to the balcony and looked out at the city of Xylos Prime, glittering in the light of the twin suns. Sarah Chen was gone, but I had a feeling she'd be back, and when she came, she'd be someone different, someone she'd never imagined she could be. And I'd be there to welcome her. It was 6 months before I saw Sarah Chen again. I was assigned to a new post on Krill, the homeworld of Jax's species, when I received the message. "Aris," it read, "I know it's been a while, and I know I said I was going to take your advice and try to be something else, and I have. I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of reflecting, a lot of trying to figure out who I am when I'm not a soldier. And I've realized something. Being a soldier doesn't have to be all I am. It's just one part of me, one piece of the puzzle, and I can choose what I do with that piece. So I'm going to keep being a soldier. I'm going to keep protecting people, but I'm also going to be something else. I'm going to be a person, a human being, with all the messy, complicated, wonderful things that come with that. And I'm going to start by being your friend, if you'll have me. Your friend, Sarah." I smiled as I read the message. Then I sent a reply. "I'd like that," I wrote. "I'd like that a lot." And I did. The end. Epilogue: A New Beginning. Sarah Chen's journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. And as I sat in my quarters on Krill, staring at the stars outside my window, I realized that her story was just one of many. One of countless stories of humans making their way in the galaxy, carving out a place for themselves among the stars. We were Deathworlders. We were survivors. We were soldiers and diplomats and everything in between. And we were never going to stop, not until we'd made our mark on the universe, not until we'd proven that a species from a Category 12 Deathworld could change the galaxy for the better. Sarah Chen was proof of that. She was proof that even in the darkest moments, there was always hope, always a chance to be something more. And as I looked out at the stars, I smiled. Because the future was bright. And the best was yet to come.